I am Iron Man.
In this video, I take a look at the top 10 best MCU movies of the franchise in my opinion, and also I want you guys to get involved and tell me your opinions on what your top 10 best MCU movies are. And without further ado, let's get into the listing. In at number 10, Iron Man 2.
I told you I don't want to join your super secret boy band.
I think that this movie is like Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. And I'm one of those guys that loves this movie, and I think that it is funny, action-packed, and although this movie is predictable, I just feel that the entertainment factor is what you watch a movie for, and this is the reason I love this movie. I think it also includes the likes of Black Widow, who would later go on to become one of the major superheroes moving forward, and her being included in this movie and her introduction into the MCU through this movie makes it even more special. I think that Rhodey's change from being Terrence Howard to being Don Cheadle went successfully well, considering the fact that there was a lot of controversy around this time whether it was the right decision, and this change was such a big part of the MCU's early days, and it proven right, as Don Cheadle has done amazing in the MCU since. And also, most of the movie is about Iron Man dying, and they made that entertaining as fuck, of him having the time of his life, and really one of the last times we see the fun version of Iron Man before he goes all serious and gets PTSD from the Avengers movie. So I think that this movie holds special place in many people's hearts for being one of the funniest MCU movies of all time. In at number 9, Avengers Infinity War.
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizard.
I think this movie was such an impactful movie that really changed the landscape of the MCU and has easily got to be in everybody's top 10 due to the impact it had globally, as this movie got many people like myself interested into the MCU on the back of this movie, as not only the controversy but everybody was talking about this movie. And you know if it's a good movie when everybody, whether it be in your classrooms, whether it be your friends, your family, are talking about this movie. You know it's a cultural movie and one of the biggest movies of the decade. And to me, that's what this movie was. It helped to build up the next movie, which would go down as one of the best movies of all time in Endgame. And without this movie, you would not have got the hype around Endgame, and you would not have got the great story of Endgame if it wasn't for this great movie. I think also something that is different about this movie is how the bad guy wins. The bad guy actually wins the battle, and that is not seen in many superhero movies, and I think that's what created the controversy. I think that's what created the talk, because people were like, what's happened to the Avengers after they disappeared, and Thanos winning. What happens now that Thanos has won? What's he going to do? Conquer more worlds? What's going to happen? And that was so good to get that cliffhanger ending, which created hype and drive to go watch the next movie, which is a great thing to do, especially if you're Marvel, because you're going to get more asses in seats. In at number 8, Ant-Man.
You're full of shit.
Oh yeah.
I think this movie just feels like a breath of fresh air in the MCU and Phase 2, as this movie doesn't take itself too serious and is one of the funniest installments in the MCU, and I feel that the introduction to his character was fantastic, from the villain to the story, and acts is one of my personal favourites, as it is really entertaining, and also the cast is exceptional, from Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, Michael Douglas, Michael Pena, and Corey Stoll. I think this was a great way to start up the Ant-Man franchise, and Paul Rudd as Ant-Man was like the perfect matchup, as he makes the Ant-Man character what it is. He's funny, he's a great character, and that wouldn't be there if Paul Rudd didn't do that. And people might be saying, why have you put Ant-Man in your top 10, even though it's good? I don't think it's in top 10, blah blah blah. I think Ant-Man deserves to be in there for entertainment. In number 7, Spider-Man Far From Home.
Spider-Man's name is Peter Parker.
Although this movie isn't necessarily the best Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, it acted as one of the closest Spider-Man movies since the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, in which we just haven't seen in a long time, from the emotional tribute to Iron Man all the way to the great, weird and wacky fight scenes with Mysterio. I feel it packs a punch, and although the first movie was a tad underwhelming, this made up for this and actually showed us how influential Tom Holland's Spider-Man will be in the future of the MCU. I think this movie also had a lot of drama surrounding this movie as well, with MJ finding out who Peter Parker actually is, in which is Spider-Man, and also the world finding out who Peter Parker actually is and that he is Spider-Man, in which has never ever been done before. We've seen that MJ finding out who Peter Parker is, obviously in the original Sam Raimi movies, but this was something different, with everybody in the world finding out who Peter Parker was, in which is something that's never been explored since, or ever will be, I don't think, in movies. In number 6, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Darwin? Didn't expect to see your protege again after all
Holy
these...
shit, Darren.
To me, I think I'm probably on my own here, which I'm fine with, as many people would probably put that on their top 10 worst. Fair enough. I'm not going to argue with that if you think that, but in my opinion, I enjoyed this movie. And although I know a lot of people were complaining about MODOK not feeling like a massive threat, I'm not used to watching MODOK in movies, but this is just, remember, this is just a version of MODOK, one version. There could be multiple, there could be a proper destroyer. This is just a version in this particular movie. So there could be a badass one out there in a different universe, but this is just a version of that character. And I think, yeah, being Kang's bitch isn't necessarily what you wanted, but I think Kang was the main thing to look at here. He was evil, callous, and such a useful villain that looks like he could be a threat throughout the rest of the MCU moving forward. I think he just looked the presence that you would expect to follow in Thanos' footsteps. And I could see that. You could see the fear on Janet's face when she was like, why are we back here? We got to leave now, blah, 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 and didn't speak about why until we find out it was because of Kang, and we learned the backstory of that. That was deep, that was special, and it was so different from an Ant-Man movie, which is normally comical in that sense. It was different, it was more story-based, in which was great. This was Ant-Man's biggest threat, and I appreciate the MCU trying to provide something different. In at number 5, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
There's a button under the handle. Press that in.
Okay. Now what?
Open the door.
Out of all the 2023 MCU movies, this one packed the bigger punch and acts as one hell of an ending for the original Guardians, and felt like an end of an era for James Gunn in the MCU and a curtain call for the original Guardian. From the impactful great backstory of Rocket to the ending of Star-Lord's love chase of Gamora to the introduction of the new set of Guardians, this movie had everything. Also, the drama of Rocket's near death was extraordinary, the comedy of Pom and Drax was great, and the big battle between the Guardians and High Evolution was too good to leave off this top 10 listing. In at number 4, Thor Ragnarok.
And you and I had a fight recently.
Did I win?
No, I won, easily.
Doesn't sound right.
Well, it's true.
To me, this has to be one of the greatest MCU movies of all time, as it is everything from Thor finally getting a great movie to the return of Hulk. I think this was one of those superhero movies that you just can't leave off this list. I think this has to be one of the most destructive villains we have seen in the MCU to date, as this was Thor's hardest test so far, and Thor had to destroy his whole planet in order to kill his sister Hela, in which was the villain in this particular movie. And I think this movie felt like the first time we saw the comedic side to Thor, and as a result made for one of the best movies in the MCU, as it was so different and so fresh from Thor being this fucking boring Shakespearean character to now being one of the funniest characters within the MCU. In at number 3, Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
To me, I think Iron Man is and always will be one of the best superhero movies of all time, as it helped to not only kickstart the MCU, but also to introduce one of the best superheroes in the MCU to date, and in the best manner possible. Also, this movie remains one of the most entertaining and funnier MCU movies to date. From the way it shows us how Tony Stark turned into Iron Man, this is without a shadow of a doubt one of the best backstories of a superhero movie. Finally, the villain was cruel, sly businessman named Obadiah Stane, which turned out to be the perfect first villain of the MCU and for Iron Man, in which this movie helps us to hype us up for the future of the MCU movies, hence why this has to be on the list. In at number 2, Spider-Man No Way Home.
Scooby-Doo this shit.
In the midst of one of the worst MCU phases, this is an absolute gem of a movie. Spider-Man No Way Home is without shadow of a doubt a classic, in which to me is not only one of the best MCU movies, but also one of the best Spider-Man movies, as this was the first time we saw 3 different sets of Spider-Man movies coming crashing together in an absolute blockbuster. This movie is filled full of drama, entertainment, and emotion, as everything happened in this movie, including the death of Aunt May, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, fighting and curing all the best Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield villains, to the return of both Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man. As well as all of this, we see the downfall of Peter Parker being revealed as Spider-Man to Doctor Strange having to cause everyone to forget Peter Parker. From beginning to end, this remains an absolute gem and one of the first names wrote down on my top 10. Before we get onto the rest of the video, I just want to tell you guys, thank you for the support, because I've absolutely enjoyed making these videos for you guys. If you want to see more of it, all you have to do is press that subscribe button, as it would really help the channel grow, the community grow, and you can join the community by hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, hitting that notification bell, and let's get back to the video. In at number 1, Avengers Endgame. To me, this movie has got to be on this list, and top of the list, as this easily is the best MCU movie of all time. And there's arguments to be held whether it's the best ever superhero movie of all time. To me, it is tied with Spider-Man 2 as the greatest of all time. But let me know down in the comments down below whether you think it is the greatest of all time, or if there's any others that you think should be on the top of this list or in other best superhero movies top lists. As to me, I think this is the greatest. This is now the benchmark moving forward, and every movie gets compared to this one if you're in that superhero category. No matter if you're Marvel, DC, you could be a Lego movie, you could be anything that's to do with superheroes, you are getting compared to Endgame. In which is unfair, necessarily speaking, because nothing is now going to match up to that sort of level or potential. And we've had things come close to that, don't get me wrong, but nothing's going to get to those levels in my genuine opinion, because of the emotion, the drama that this movie caused, and the hype created was over years and years of build-up. So it was always going to be a massive success.